November 8th, 2020 to order. This is a Zoom meeting. First order of business, Pledge of Allegiance. Charles, would you please lead us?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Charles. Public forum. Anyone from the public wishing to speak? Hearing none, let's move on to item 3. And that's the approval of minutes. 3.1 would be the August 17th, 2020 regular meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Charles seconds it. Any comments, questions, changes, additions, etc.? I had none.
No.
Hearing none, call the question. All in favor? Selectman Haverda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. That motion carries. 3.2, the August 24th, 2020 special meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second? So I'll second it. There we go. Any comments, questions, changes, etc.? Hearing none, call the question. Selectman Haverda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
I was not present, so I abstain.
Okay, then we will have to table these. Oh no, 2 of the 3 that were there. 2 of the 4 that were there. That's good enough. I will. I vote A. Aye, rather. And that motion carries. Item 4, Public Works Director Tom Fillion is here to discuss and take possible action on grinding services. Tom? You're on mute, Tom. Hold on, let's see if I can do it. There you go.
You hear me?
Got you now.
Okay, very good. All right, good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Tom.
We are going with, well, I'm recommended that we go with Bertowski excavation for the grinding this year. Hold on a second. I'm having problems with that damn thing. All right. He'll be doing a double grind with a cap price of $15,000. The agreement was in this September was $13,000 with the use of our loader for $8,000, 8,000 yards ground at $350 per hour for any additional grinding. It's going to be a little different this particular grind because when I had talked to him, we had another storm, and I probably brought in about another maybe 2,500 yards on top of it. So hold on a second.
Everybody has to mute so he doesn't get the feedback.
He's got 2 devices up, I think.
Yep. Okay, you good?
Yes, better.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. This darn thing wasn't working here, so I had to make sure I cover myself. All right, so that being said, on this extra yardage, no matter what, he's $350 an hour compared to $400 with Durham Middlefield before. And Durham Middlefield before, we had 2 loaders working with him during the time to keep up. And also, I had talked to Durham Middlefield, and of course, with the storm, they weren't going to be available to us at this time. Right now, our pit is pretty much maxed out, and we need to get this thing ground as soon as possible. So that's where we're at. I am expecting that it's probably going to be a little bit more money for the extra amount of material that we have. So on the norm, it would be $15,000 cap.
Pam,
Okay.
I want to talk quickly. Pam, the contract we signed with Ignatowski is the one that meets the federal guidelines for procurement for potential FEMA reimbursement.
I mean, the answer is that I can't say that with 100% certainty because I believe because of the time crunch, you know, he did not seek out multiple bids.
Right.
So my general understanding is, you know, you have to go out and do some kind of bidding thing, but I think that he you know, because of issues involved, that he was not able to do that on a timing thing. So it's one of those cost benefit analysis. It's possible,
Yep.
but I can't definitively tell you that.
Well, he
Mary
did
Jane?
seek out our original bidder and they just couldn't do it, is my understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Right, but you know, the general boilerplate of those federal procurement things is usually, you know, multiple, you know, you seek multiple
Oh, the whole
bids.
process and everything, yeah.
Yeah, the whole thing. And I think it was one of those things, the cost of the contract versus what he needed to get done within the time frame he needed. It was going ahead.
But do the guidelines have, you know, ability for exceptions and that type? I mean, this is exceptional times with the 2 storms and everything.
Understood. I mean, what I remember from, you know, one of our other state of emergencies is, you know, there's usually a period of time after the occurrence where you're able to kind of supersede normal bidding. What I can't tell you definitively is that time period 30 days from the occurrence, 60 days, you know.
All right, well, I mean,
Mary Jane?
I just wanted to add, as far as FEMA, as long as you're following your guidelines and today you're going to approve that contract, all we need is approval by the Board of Selectmen and the signed contract itself for FEMA.
Good.
Even better.
Yeah, much better.
Good.
All right. Any other questions or comments on this?
no, I'll move it.
And second by Sue. Call the question. Selectman Haberda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. That motion carries. Tom, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Happy chipping and grinding. All right. Item 5, Town Engineer Janice Blasiak, and 5.1 is to discuss and take possible action on RFQ number 1-2021, State Project number 59-166, replacement of the Sawmill Road Bridge over the West River Inspection Services.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Morning.
As you know, this project has been ongoing for a number of years. It's the replacement of the Sawmill Road Bridge. We have attained consulting engineers completing the design for the bridge, which is wrapping up soon, and we're expected to go out to bid within the next month or two. And in that process, we also need to hire inspection and services during construction of the project. So following the required federal local bridge program guidelines and DOT's requirements, we put out the RFQ to hire inspection services engineering firm. And we did receive 14 submittals of letters of interest on this RFQ. And following the process that we're required to do, we set up a committee of 3. That was myself, the assistant town engineer, and the town planner, that we each individually review those submissions to come down to at least 5 shortlisted firms to then go through the process of interviewing. So we did then complete the interview process with the 5 selected firms. And in doing so, we individually rated them as well based on a setup of questions that we asked each of the consultants, as well as allow them to present their qualifications and interest in the project to our committee. And as a result of the individual rating forms for the interview process from our committee, Wengel, McDonald, Costello, which is also known as WMC, came out with the highest rating in the interview platform. And so therefore, I'd like your approval to proceed with the process. Next is to meet with them along with DOT to scope out the work to be done for the inspection services, and receive a proposal from them for costs, which will then again be brought back to the Board of Selectmen for final approval. So at this point, we're just selecting them to move forward with scoping and proposal.
Thank you, Janice. Any comments or questions?
My bid summary, I want to make, it doesn't, it just says yes. And it's one of one, and really doesn't say anything.
Well, because it's not a proposal, Charlie. It's just a submission of qualifications at this point.
Oh,
And
okay. So it's, all right. So I see what you're saying.
Yes.
So,
Right. So they
does
had
that mean we just on the qualifications.
Right.
So the other people are not going to submit bids. They're not qualified. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not that they're not qualified. They were just selected to be the one we felt was best for the project based on, their submission. But until we reach an agreed upon proposal from this board, the others kind of sit in abeyance as a backup in case, the next, if we don't meet any kind of negotiated price with them.
I don't think I've ever seen it. It seems like we're choosing a contractor at this point. It seems very early in the process to be choosing a contractor. I mean,
No, this is not the contractor. This is an engineering firm to perform inspection services.
I understand, and not by contractor I meant. Okay, I don't recognize this process. Normally, the qualification part is assume, you go through that and you make sure everybody's qualified, then they make their bids, and then a decision is made, where we're making a decision based on qualifications. Right.
And then we won't approve a contract until it's brought back to you again for review. This is the process we're required.
We're only getting the bid in the contract potentially from one bidder who we've chosen as the qualified one.
Right, because this is the process that's required as part of the federal local bridge funding.
Yes, I concur.
It's just different for me.
Yeah, we did this also for the Route 77 project, where we selected a consulting firm for design services doing the same method.
Okay.
I mean, the state requires it to do it this way.
Okay.
And the yeses on your bid summary are for the affidavits that, whether they had the required affidavits, non-collusive and affirmative action. That's why
I see yeses for everybody. Okay.
Yeah, that's just an affidavit. And then Janice's committee went in great detail over all of the qualification packages. And then the DOT requires her to do it this way. And they sit down, right, Janice?
Right,
they sit down with it. Yeah.
And then I have to submit to them to go to the next step for the interviews to get their approval to do that. And then now we're at the point where we want to sit down and scope the project, and then get their proposal.
I don't have just different for me, but okay.
Right. It is different than our standard procedure for purchasing for the town, but because it's 80% federal funding, we have to follow their guidelines. And it is also, we keep the town's interests involved in terms of our policies by bringing it to the Board of Selectmen for their approval process throughout.
Okay. So what do we need now? A motion to move forward?
We need approval of the selection of Wengel, McDonald, and Costello Consulting Engineers for construction inspection services for the replacement of the Sawmill Road Bridge project.
I will move that.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further comments?
I would just say subject to DOT successful negotiations or something.
Okay,
So, because if they don't come up with a good price or, you know, something that's approved by everyone, then you'll go to the next most qualified.
See, no, that's my struggle. You said if they don't come up with a good price, but we're not asking for any other prices, so how do we know what's a good price?
Well,
Other
oh,
than
that's,
whether we can afford it or not.
Yeah, because DOT actually, you know, they scope it out, they approve the man hours and all that based on the work effort that's involved. So it's quite involved in terms of meeting the requirements from the program itself.
and if you think about it, you know, to have these guys bid right now without kind of a lot more detail about scope, you'd be all over the place. So that's another reason that they probably do it the way they do it. They really have to
And it
nail
just-
down scope.
But just when you said good price, I said, okay, well, that's a nice price. I like the color of the ink or something. There's no relevance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're just the way that is.
This is a typical
I
method
think
of
you summed it
selecting.
up when you said it's the state's requirements.
It is.
Yeah, but it's also a typical method for selecting professional services such as engineering services
Okay.
in the
Okay.
industry.
All right, we spent enough time on it. We're not.
all right, we have a motion on the table. Is there anything further? Nothing? Call the question. Selectman Haverda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Janice, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Item 6, Facilities Task Force. 6.1, to receive for discussion a presentation from the Facilities Task Force. We have Gary McKelney and Bob Hartman here today from the task force. First off, let me thank both of you as well as your other task force members for the countless hours and time you put into this effort. And we greatly appreciate your volunteering to do so. So with that, Gary, I'll turn it over to you.
You're on mute, Gary.
You're muted, Gary.
There you
Okay,
There you go.
obviously, this wasn't the forum that we had hoped to present this in. We had hoped to present it to you in a more open, maybe even a workshop initially, so we could get more back and forth, but time has passed and events are. Let me first say that the task force, from my perspective, was one of the more enjoyable groups that I've ever worked with. It worked very collegially. Everybody was qualified, helpful, informed, and it worked. The task force worked great. Town employees were wonderful. We were greatly impressed by the quality of the people that we were searching for information from, and we thought they did a great job. And lastly, I would mention that Sally Bertowski, as our secretary, was invaluable. Let me go through the general findings. If anybody wants to jump in and interrupt, we can do that, or you can do it at the end. Most facilities are physically up to date. Town hall, library, community center, police, fire, etc. However, parking is an issue virtually everywhere, and paper storage is an issue, although you as a select board dealt with that very early on. We brought it to you and you set up a committee to address that, and so we just left that in your hands. What we determined to be wholly inadequate was public works. Lacks parking, outside storage, no truck wash, location, etc. And when we say public works, we're also including park and rec facilities that are on that site, which, as you know, because you approved a rented trailer for them because for safety issues for the park and rec employees. 52 Church is structurally inappropriate for municipal use. The food bank has insufficient storage, old systems, marginal construction integrity. Social services, inadequate space, no meeting room, no client confidentiality. Solid waste management facilities, which includes the transfer station, the stump dump, et cetera, needs attention. The Boston Street facility has no utilities, bathroom, it's a makeshift layout, and no parking. Friends of Library Storage is a marginal building lacking facilities, bathrooms. In my opinion, it's actually a dangerous facility. And there's a lot of minor issues for facilities operates out of 4 different locations. Smaller departments have issues of storage. Town Hall South is cramped, lacks storage. Youth and Family Services stores in a wet basement. Town Hall police facilities have storage issues. Park and Rec, see Public Works above. We made some basic recommendations on property. The first is move Public Works, Park and Rec facilities to a single centralized location. Consolidate and assess other departments for potential inclusion, particularly facilities, possibly natural resources, and plan for future growth and federal and state compliance. As you know, Janice has issued and is working with Silver Petroselli on a study and a recommendation to help us with that process. We're suggesting that we consolidate food bank and social services in as yet undetermined location, which would require access, accessibility, and privacy. 52 Church was considered but rejected due to the negative impacts on the parking as well as the some of the physical issues in the building. And as a side, demolish the current food bank, which is, I think most of you know, is a converted chicken coop. We're recommending that you use the Lathrop House to support library friends operation, demolish the old community nursery building for parking. And as a corollary to that, if you look at a map, we could potentially acquire a strip of land behind the church and the house next to it to connect that parking lot to the town hall parking lot. Obviously, the acquisition of some of that land becomes a negative, but the ease of and flow of parking and the fact that each building could back up the other could be a plus. Use the barn behind Town Hall for Youth and Family Services and possibly other departments. Demolish 52 Church Street and create parking with appropriate streetscape treatment. I know engineering has done some work and design on that. Develop the current social services site to support the Adams School functions. That property was originally acquired to enhance the parking and traffic flow, and a department found its way into it in the meantime. So that could be we could go back to the original purpose for that if we find an appropriate site for social services. Sell the Boston Street property and evaluate all town-owned and undeveloped land to determine potential for sale, excluding obvious open space properties like Timberlands and East River Preserve and others. There's about 55 parcels totaling 85 acres, although some of those have open space limitations, wetlands issues, or town road restrictions. So each one has to be examined for the purpose for which it was acquired and whether that's being maintained. I mean, some of them just came as part of zoning requirements for open space, and they look like they're kind of orphan properties, and they are, but they're open space legally. We made some procedural recommendations, and if you look at the cover letter that came with this, most of us on this committee have some consulting background and experience, and so we kind of looked at some non-physical facilities issues and came up with some recommendations, specifically to coordinate town schedules for events to optimize usage of facilities, to require each department have a long-range written plan integrated into an overall town plan, updated so that longer-term non-budget issues are identified in annual budget process. And that could include regulatory issues. It could include, vehicle maintenance. There's a whole bunch of issues that come into that. Confirm which department is responsible for each town-owned open space property. That has not been done. It's a fairly straightforward process, but it needs to be clarified. And finally, consider potential regionalization of facilities prior to initiating new facilities projects. And specifically, we're looking at the transfer station, and I know that's being considered. We identified issues that we thought were outside of our responsibility to make a recommendation, but identified them as issues that need to be dealt with somewhere in the town. Materials management, planning, solid waste, transfer station, catch basin cleanings, dredging, spoils. And that's a potentially large issue for the Marina Commission, is a location for dredging spoils, and that gets into state and federal regulatory issues. So we wrestled with it and had some ideas, but have no solutions. And then again, written management plans. We stayed away from energy because of the Johnson Controls assessment, but generally recognize that we need to identify and retrofit geothermal and solar opportunities as they come up and try to anticipate regulatory and other control issues. We stayed away from volunteer fire stations, which the town supports financially and might provide some solutions for some of the smaller property needs of smaller departments, because some of them are not well utilized. We noted but didn't do anything about affordable and high density housing, and we stayed away from hazmat committee and disaster plan integration. We also observed that the BOS creates an administrative management committee. We think for the benefit of the selectmen, probably to include some of the major department heads, but that's an organizational issue that we raise a question on, but aren't going to answer. We also noticed that there are a lot of committees in town that are inefficient, and some thought ought to be given to staff assignments, overuse of staff. We found some staff people that were just overburdened by the fact that they participate in a lot of committees, and other committees that don't have any staff support at all. So some thought needs to be given to that. And then finally, if we remove properties and take stuff down, we ask that the town consider deconstruction, which is a process of taking it apart and reusing some of the materials rather than just trashing everything and put them in a dumpster. Previous recommendations made include the paper storage policy, which I mentioned before, the demolishing of 52 Church Street, using the town hall barn for certain localized town storage uses, and start planning for public works and park and recreation facility, and that's been done. So that's briefly and succinctly what we tried to do, and Bob and I would be happy to entertain questions or thoughts.
Gary, I think you skipped B, in the group before about making sure that the committees and commission members were knowledgeable of different structures.
Yes,
And I think that's very important, especially, across the board. I appreciate what you're saying about the committees and that maybe, it's a cross between the administrative management committee and looking at all the committees we have. I know just in the past year, I think we've added 2 more town committees, and I can see where that would, defining some of that and giving people an education as they're appointed to them. I think it's an educational process, both structurally within the town, how committees operate and what their responsibilities are, and also how they tie into regulatory issues and that type of thing. So I can see that as being something that should be looked at. I'm not sure if creating another committee is the answer.
the committee, review the committees.
No, I'm not volunteering for anything at this point.
Yeah,
But, I think that I, as someone who has been on a number of different committees and commissions over the years, I know there's always a learning curve, but part of the learning curve, I think, should be the specifics of regulations, especially when you start with inland wetlands and P&Z and some of the bigger issues that the town does face and decisions that are made, in a monthly meeting. Sometimes there are unintended consequences which could be, avoided or at least brought into bearing when decisions are made. So I don't have any other specific questions though at this point. So
let me just comment. Thank you for reading the detail of the report. And picking up that particular thing. I think one of the things we noticed is that, and you know this from being on a lot, you need to have somebody on a committee or a commission that sort of understands the town management framework, state, maybe even federal.
Even just freedom of information.
Not enough to have a good heart. You need to know how things work.
Exactly. And keep us on the straight and narrow. I mean, often we do things, I don't want to say seat of the pants, but there is a procedure. There are, reasons for these things, and sometimes dealing with them, right in the very beginning can save a lot of commotion later on. So, okay.
Yeah.
At the sake of stating the obvious, A sort of becomes even more important, because that is the role of staff, is to make sure that the respective boards and commissions are adhering to policies and appropriate procedures, regulatory, legal, or otherwise. One thing that I want to mention, Mitch and I have had this discussion about possibly putting together a board orientation pack for some of our major boards and commissions or task force, which not only includes, what the responsibilities of that board are and what the and how it interacts with the town, as well as this idea about what does a town structure look like. I can go there, but also just the general governance principles for some of these boards. Some of them are some of them are advisory, some of them are regulatory. So I think it's this is something that Mitch and I had already identified, something we want to take a look at in terms of a board orientation. Because you're right, some people come onto these boards, they get appointed by the Democratic Town Committee or Republican Town Committee, or volunteer independently. And yes, they have a passion for something or they have an interest in something, but they may not have now working knowledge of what that committee actually does. So,
Matt, even one thing that has really, I've noticed not only within this board, but other boards I'm on, that during this COVID crisis, so many of us are working online. And with freedom of information and the rest of the things that are going on now, especially in a municipal setting, people start talking and emailing back and forth, and those communications have effect. If something is questioned, next year, and even just bid situations and that type of thing, people have to understand that they just that they have to operate within a framework. As simple as that. Whether it be social media or emails or Zoom meetings or whatever, when you start making decisions for the community and for the taxpayers, you got to dot some I's and cross some T's and make sure you do it right. Okay.
Great, Pam? You
And
have a comment?
I just couldn't agree more to have some kind of training packet for board members. I mean, one example, an unnamed board member, I don't know, 2 years ago was an FOI situation, and this person said that they didn't believe in their obligations of FOI, so they weren't going to do X, Y, or Z. And it was one of these things, like, that's the law, and you may have certain principles, but you need to follow the law, or you're exposing the town to some real problems. So, I think it's very helpful to have something that you're discussing.
And Mitch, if I'm not mistaken, in the past, we have extended training opportunities, particularly on FOI, offered through CCM to various boards and commissions. Is that consistent with what we've done?
Yes, when there's been FOI, and also there's been some meeting protocol training, I have extended it to all the current chair people. I've not extended it to every commission member, but I have extended to the chair people so that they are aware of the FOI, because they're going to lead that commission, and also some meeting protocol. I'm not sure, we haven't had that many people take advantage of it. I know some have, though.
Good. All right.
Back to, go ahead, Sue. Go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate all that discussion, but in the interest of getting back to the agenda item, which is the Facilities Commission, I guess I'd like to say to Gary and the commission, wow, we're aware this is a colossal amount of work over the past many, many months, and I just want to express my appreciation for that. Secondly, I guess my high-level reaction to the information you presented is, to me, the Public Works facility is just in a huge class by itself, and seems to me to be the subject that we should be focusing on. Very long-term, expensive, important proposition that we need to educate the community and the taxpayers on as soon as we possibly can, because we should be taking action now to be planning for the future. So that's my high-level reaction. But I guess my question for you is, where do we go from here? I think each of these bullets could be a topic of its own, with lots of questions and things to delve into and understand. How do you envision the next steps here?
Well, let me just step back one. Bob's here. I've done all the talking, and Bob was at all the meetings and an integral part of it. Do you have anything to add before we respond to Susan's question, Bob, or do you want to respond to Susan's question?
Well, I'll just go back and say I couldn't agree more. It's somebody, this town has a great propensity to appoint people to commissions and committees and boards, but I agree we need probably better expertise. But what we also don't tend to do is appoint people from the underlying departments. If you're overseeing somebody, anything, ed, public works, something, an employee from one of the groups that's being overseen or studied should be there. We had the luxury of being able to reach straight into each department, and the cooperation we had was extraordinary. And that's when you really found where the knowledge and expertise was. So I would always plumb for that. I couldn't agree more with Sue that Public Works is probably the best. I don't know how specific you want to get here, but when we put Mr. Fillion in the chair and said, where would you like to be instead of there, he gave us a location, and it was surprisingly high on the map. So we've already gone out and walked off a couple of properties. We've looked at a few things. I'd like to start there. And the last thing is really, there's no surprises. Anybody surprised at anything they heard this morning? You know, so this all comes down to amplifying perhaps the town planning process or procedure or function, so that we don't have to address this every dozen years, you know, after the fact. But everybody's willing. Everyone we spoke to, every town department was very ready, willing, and able to cooperate. So Church Street, we'd like to get use of right away if we could. But yeah, Public Works, and we also commissioned a little study to see what would go in that place down the driveway. You know, light manufacturing, office space, whatever else would have to be up on stilts because you couldn't possibly cap that for any other, you know, for residential use, I don't think. But it was a great learning, and I count myself as the least qualified person on that committee, and it was a great group to be around.
At the risk of correcting you, one of Bob's assets is he was born and raised in this town, and he knows virtually every piece of property in town. So that became very helpful, in addition to his other skills. But Sue, in answer to your question, Public Works is, I think Public Works is one of the keys to this, because once we solve Public Works, we solve park and rec issues, we solve facility issues. It frees up space in Town Hall South for the rest of the issues. Maybe we look at, and I really hadn't thought about this until I was reviewing this again, maybe we look at a storage facility, and it circles back to the paper storage issue. I mean, we have paper storage all over the place, and the Selectmen's Committee is working on that, but maybe there's actually a storage bin or a storage vault that's created somewhere, and the Public Works facility might be a place to put that, because that frees up a lot of space for other things. That empties out the Boston Street facility, which can get therefore repurposed and presumably sold. Social services, I think, and we left the Board of Education alone, but if they get to move into the science wing and do some stuff there, I think that frees up a couple of facilities that might be repurposed for the town. And I don't necessarily speak for them because we can't. But that clearly empties out the Lathrop House, which means, and there actually is a design we found out in the engineering department of a way of connecting the Lathrop House to the library, solves some problems of meeting space and solves some problems of safety for the facility that the Friends of the Library are now in, and creates parking space. So some of this is steps. When some things get done, other things become available. So,
Gary, I couldn't agree more with Sue's assessment, and Bob and yours as well, that Public Works is the #1 item on our list. There's an amazing confluence of some events here that could be occurring in relatively short time frame, which is why this is an appropriate time for the Facilities Task Force to have made their report. As the board knows, land acquisition has been, even though we can't disclose locations, land acquisition has been very active in looking for open space and or potential municipal use space within the town. It's a matter of public record. We are in the middle of phase 2 environmental for the Thane property, which is adjacent to the Public Works facility. The use of that facility probably clears up the Boston Street storage like my basement issue. The stuff that I should have gotten rid of, some of which might be usable someday. And that creates an opportunity with the Boston Street location to put that back on the tax rolls, to potentially put that out for competitive bid for pricing. There are some challenges there, particularly with the Transfer Act and potential contamination of that site. But nonetheless, these things, as Gary was saying, sort of dovetail. And this is exactly the time that we're looking to start to promulgate these ideas and these potential plans with the public. So I didn't see Jesse Williams get on here, but he typically looks at the Zoom meetings once we post them online. So I'm going to assume that we will be having some renewed interest in the Public Works facility, and we will start to talk to the public in much larger forums than this, relative to what we're attempting to do at Public Works. One other comment: when Town Center South plan was put into place and enacted, there was a developer who had made some solicitations about acquiring the Public Works facility, because the Town Center South plan contemplated moving Public Works somewhere other than where it was, for the same reasons, the obvious reasons that we still consider it a good move to move it. But there was a developer at least one developer who was ready to come in and develop that property, particularly as it relates to transit-oriented development being right alongside the train station. So there's a domino effect, but you're absolutely right, Sue. This is the time to start talking to the public and letting them know what we're thinking and what the long-term plans are.
Okay,
Anything else? Any other questions or comments?
we've solved everything.
Wonderful.
We're gonna need a big wand to wave.
Exactly. Once
Well,
again,
Matt, I
on
would,
that whole subject, I mean, where does your committee stand at this point, Gary? Do you have a next step, or should your next step be developing some actual action items, or actionable items anyway, to present? What is your committee's next step, Gary?
at this point, we are dormant. The question is, are we terminated, or is there a future purpose either to, as you say, develop action plans, which I don't think was our intent, or to convene periodically and review status. Our goal, and as we were constructed, we were not constructed to be a building committee per se, although some of us have worked with Janice on the process of the RFPs and other issues, and I think some of us would be willing to stay with that. But I think subject to what Janice is in the first selectmen are contemplating, maybe a public works building committee should be created, and it wouldn't surprise me if a member or two of us want to stay on that. Mr. Hartman, unfortunately, or fortunately, by the grace of the electorate, has moved on and technically is not a member of our commission anymore, because he can't be. So, and I think that's correct, Pam, right? Even though it's a commission for a specific purpose, he cannot, as an elected official, he cannot be a member.
he could always be a liaison from the Board of Finance.
And we've been using him that way, but
Yeah.
technically he's not a member. So,
Right.
And one of our members has already resigned. So I think some of us would be happy to contemplate continuing in some form.
Well, Gary, and this is simply a suggestion, but to Matt's point, a lot of these potential actions are are interrelated, even interrelated with Board of Education. I would think perhaps a grid of some sort that would literally demonstrate. Again, this goes back to communicating with the public about what some potential long-term plans are, but to develop a grid, i.e., if we were to relocate the public works garage, what that would affect, how it would affect the other suggestions you are making here. That'd be pretty neat, coordinate that with, what if the Board of Ed moved over to the science wing, what would,
Right.
what would, if we developed a whole grid with that, that would be a pretty good communication and a starting point, knowing that, this step has to happen for the next 3 steps to have potential. That'd be pretty interesting, I would think, for your new administrative committee.
I think we have, I think
I
we
slipped that right in, didn't I?
You did. I think we have that thought in mind, but we could put that on paper. And by the way, we obviously didn't ignore the education department. We went over and had a couple of sit-down meetings with the superintendent. So he would not be surprised by any thoughts or any designs that we have on certain properties. And he kept us well informed about his timing of the way he sees things happening. So we're not ignorant of the Board of Ed process either. But yeah, I suppose we could sit down and do sort of a, as you say, a grid or a set of arrows of
Almost
if-
like a,
if
it's almost
this,
like a
that.
Gantt, it's like a Gantt or a flow chart. Gantt.
Yeah.
There's been some, I agree, Gary, I think a number of the people on this committee should go forward together with the next step, because so much heavy lifting has been done, and you don't want to recreate, start over again with the dialogue with the people in these various departments who've already been contacted. Why do it again? I get to say that because I don't have to do I don't have to do it.
You're not off the hook, Harvey. You're not off the hook.
But I will, because I have a natural curiosity about it. It's been fabulous, eye-opening. But I think it makes sense now to take the knowledge that's been gained and start coming up with action plans. And it is true, we didn't want to get over our skis as a committee for the first part, other than to get our arms around what's going on and how it all works together. And I think, as Matt says, there's a lot of confluence of events here that could dovetail beautifully like machinery and get some great things done for the town.
Yeah, and they'd have to be movable blocks. I mean, there's no question certain steps have to happen for the next steps to even have potential. One item that I didn't see in any of this discussion was, the property next to Park and Rec that we've already moved forward on, I know, but how does that fit into the puzzle overall? Because, a couple of the things were parking issues, and, we just made a pretty big investment in parking downtown. So, that's part of the block.
Yeah. Well, I do know that
There are some things happening within the framework of these recommendations, as Gary had mentioned briefly. For instance, we have made some investments in capital investments in the waste transfer station. There's a new backhoe up there. We have $50,000. It's now set aside for repair of some of the pavement and that kind of thing. So some of these things there are being addressed in smaller fashion. 52 Church Street, just as an update, as Gary had mentioned earlier, there are engineering has 3 conceptual designs for the implementation of expanded parking for the community center. One of those includes a small storage facility, but we are fully accepting that it is structurally the current building is structurally inappropriate for municipal use. So that building will be coming down. We are working with the historic district. Randy McCartney has been nothing but gracious and willing to work with us on that because we do need their approval no matter what we do there. So we are moving to final design on one of the three options. And there'll be more to come on that. So, and we also have some funding set aside for that project, which means that we'll be able to move forward with it.
Oddly, I think we've got to look at all this stuff in the context, believe it or not, of a growing town.
Right.
We were concerned about losing population and demographics. And now, of course, post-COVID, things seem to be turning the other way and may go that way for some time. We should keep that in mind.
Agreed.
And that was the thought behind sort of these long-term plans that we were asking each department. I mean, the obvious one is that Park and Rec was more than adequate when it was built, but it was built with a population that was about 10,000 people less than we have now. So it's not shocking that there's a parking problem. It's not shocking that there's a lack of, that more space, more meeting spaces are required, et cetera. So, and it's hard to look ahead 20, 30 years, but, that's part of a planning process.
Well, Gary and Bob and the entire committee, my heartfelt thanks and appreciation for the work and the time you put in. And we will start working on that Gantt or flow chart to see what we can do in terms of the interrelatedness of some of these projects.
Yeah, and maybe pull some facts behind it. I mean, there is some information flowing around. I know we did it in the context of the Thane acquisition, but I don't know if all the selectmen have seen the Town Center South plan written in January 2007, and I believe it's digitalized. So maybe Tracy can send it out to all the selectmen just as background for your comments about there was a developer nosing around hoping that could become available.
Right.
So I mean, there is information, and I'm not going to go through it, but there is some information, and it probably needs to be more centralized and distributed better, or redistributed again.
Thank you, Gary, for that.
Okay.
All right, thank you all on that. Item 7, consider and take possible action on the letter of intent between the State of Connecticut Office of Early Childhood and Town of Guilford for child daycare services and authorize the first selectman to sign. By way of a little background, Dr. Freeman, Superintendent Freeman, and I had some conversations earlier this summer about the potential impact of schools opening in a hybrid model or an all distance learning model, and what the impact was going to be on parents in terms of childcare. So Dr. Freeman brought Jessica Catlin in from the Guilford Before and After School program, who already run before, obviously they run before and after school, daycare type arrangements for students in the elementary levels. Knowing that we didn't have the appropriate amount of space in the schools, plus we weren't going to be bringing more kids into schools on the days that they're supposed to be off, and we don't have the room to house it. I suggested that we look at the community center, that we talk to Father Stephen over at St. George, and that we talk to Ginger Brasher Cunningham at the Congregational Church. And at this point, the Guilford Before and After School program is going to be standing up these, for lack of a better term, pop-up daycare centers or facilities. And we have at the community center basically given them the top floor for their classroom activities, because this will include classroom activities while kids are on their 2 days for distance learning. At this point, we are not charging the Guilford Before and After School program. However, some of these funds that are going to be available to us from the Office of Child Care or Early Childhood will go to help offset some cleaning fees that we anticipate. Some stepped up cleaning that needs to be done as a result of the constant use of those of our facility here at the community center. So that's by way of background what this is all about. Comments or questions?
My only question, I guess, is a concern. You said that almost the entire second floor of the community center is going to be dedicated to this?
Yes. At current time, we're not using those rooms for programs, and we don't expect to be using them during the day for programs until such time as the COVID situation has gotten to a point where we're comfortable to start offering programming again.
Yeah, I'm even thinking of, the meeting. I mean, so many meetings go on there, but I know that most of the meetings are still Zoom, but that's going to have to just be a wait and see how that all evolves.
During
Agreed.
the school day, it's all school hours, so.
Right.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah,
used to spending the evening.
I just,
I'm
the only
thinking of
thing,
the
and you
cleaning
probably,
in between and that type of thing.
Yeah.
yeah, the only thing, and you probably already are on this, but just, I would have Karen run that kind of change of use by our insurance company and Kerma, and make sure we got whatever coverage we may need in addition to what we might need.
Yeah, that's
Agreed.
good.
That's all.
Agreed. And then the early childhood, or the Guilford Before and After School Care Program has their own set of insurances, so I think we would subrogate to them on anything that happened. But good point. We'll talk to them.
So where are we today, dude? I mean, is this a done deal at this point in time?
Yes, it is. They are ready to open the doors on.
Okay, so you don't need a motion or anything. This is more for information.
Just authorize me to sign the agreement with the state for the funding.
Okay, because I did see that it had a August 31st deadline, but that's all under control.
Yes.
Okay, I'll move it.
So just to make sure I understand, so basically for a 2-year period, we're going to be reimbursed $17,000 a month for our extra expenses associated with this. Basically, is that the idea?
Yeah.
Do we have any sense of whether our expenses will be more than that? And even if they are, we might decide it doesn't matter, but is that important for us to know?
The line there is the Office of Early Childhood shall reimburse your organization for incurred costs deemed reasonable by the OEC at a rate of no more than. So that's the cap. So whatever cost that we identify, this is sort of like the FEMA program. We just got to keep track of it. One of the things that we're trying to determine, can we actually charge rent as part of those reasonable costs?
I see. Okay. Are there any risks to the town of doing this? We mentioned pursuing proper insurance coverage and so on, but so we're operating the facility that the children would be in when they're not in school, and the reason that they're not in school those 3 days a week is so that the schools can maintain the proper distancing and sanitation and conditions and so on. So it seems that we're taking on some degree of risk.
Well, the town is, but we're basically offering the space to the Guilford Before and After School program. It's their program, not our program.
Oh, I understand.
So this is like a tenant arrangement.
I get it. Yeah, no, I understand. Okay, I'm just trying to think if there's any downside at all to it. That's all. I mean,
Pam?
Yeah, Sue, I think that's really good questions, and I'm kind of emailing right now on it because I think You know, maybe a simple hold harmless release indemnity agreement. I just emailed Pete Barrett on it. So there's the insurance and kind of the indemnity piece, something very simple for a very good idea, good cause, but I think it's worth looking into a little bit more.
All right, I think that's good. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion to authorize me to?
I moved it already.
Yeah, all right.
I'll second it.
Call the question. Selectman Haberda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Thank you very much. Item 8, appointments and resignations. Act on a resignation of Donna Daniels from the Human Rights Commission. Is there a motion to accept with appreciation and regret?
So moved.
Second.
Before we vote on this, you may have noticed that Joe Keogh, who's the chair of the Human Rights Commission, has been quietly waiting for an opportunity to respond to something. In particular, it was the letter that Donna Daniels submitted to all of us regarding her resignation. So at the appropriate time, we'll have Joe address that and probably do that under new business, if that's okay with everyone.
Did we have that letter? I'm sorry. Did we have that letter?
My understanding was Donna Daniels had shared that letter with everyone.
Okay.
No, I believe
Did you not get it?
I believe that she sent that only to you, Matt, and I know that I emailed my response only to you as well. So
Right.
I have copies of both of those letters here that I would be happy to email over to Tracy if that would be helpful. If it wouldn't drive you insane.
Right, my apologies. I thought I saw a CC on there on the actual letter itself from Donna. My apologies. Anyway, first off, let's act on the item here, and then we'll if you want to send those to Tracy, go ahead. And then when we get to new business, perhaps we can have an opportunity to look at it. But I still want you to address the concerns that she had raised. So call the question on the resignation of Donna Daniels. Selectman Haberda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Act on a recommendation to appoint Juan Kohlberg to the Human Rights Commission for a term to expire June 30th, 2024. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Second. Just a quick comment on this. I met Juan Kohlberg virtually during the period of time when Eversource was unable to connect a good portion of our community to service restoration. And we went back and forth on a couple of things relative to Eversource and my trying to intervene on his behalf and a couple other things. We wound up talking again virtually, electronically on a couple of things. We talked live. And, I said to him, you really sound like you've got some passion for some things. And have you ever thought about getting involved in town affairs? And he said, well, no. And I said, well, let me send you a list of the various boards and commissions in town and see if there's anything there that would pique your interest. And he did. He came back with a couple of commissions, and one was human rights. So I put him together with Joe Keogh, and Joe gave him a background of what the commission is about, where it's looking to go, and what it's going to do. And this is the result of that chance encounter, because he was very upset at Eversource and was and expecting me to get his power turned back on. So, anyway, probably more than anybody really wanted to know, but it's just one of those odd circumstances.
Right.
So, call the question. Selectman Abbott.
Aye.
Selectman Renner. Selectman Renner.
Aye.
Selectman Perez is also an aye. Act on a recommendation to appoint Stephanie Brown to the Human Rights Commission. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
I don't have commentary on this one, but nonetheless, call the question. Selectman Haberda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Item 4, act on a recommendation to appoint Noel Petra to the Human Rights Commission for a term to expire June 30th, 2024. I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Call the question. All in favor? Selectman Haberda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Act on a recommendation to appoint Nicholas Kane to the Parks and Recreation Commission to fill a vacancy for a term to expire February 28, 2022. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a
Second.
Good. Call the question. Selectman Haberda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Okay, item 9, request for the use of town property. Act on a request for the Golf Course Commission to place a sign on the advertising shredding event taking place September 12, 2020. Is there a motion?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Second. Call the question. Selectman Haberda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Item 9.2, act on a request from the country school to place a sign on the green advertising its virtual school fair taking place September 28th to 30th, 2020. Sign placement 9:16 to 9:30. Is there a motion?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
And call the question. Selectman Haberda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Act on a request from the Guilford Arts Center to use the green July 16th, 8th to 18th, 2021, I'm assuming, for its annual art expo and to continue to offer beer and wine as part of the food court. Is there a motion?
I'll move it. I'm assuming that the beer and wine situation is not changed and still under control.
Same plan as we approved earlier.
Okay. And no negative comments. It all seemed to work. And
Now,
okay,
we
I'll
didn't have
move
it
it.
this year. We didn't have it this year, so.
I know, but okay.
But police department is fine with it. All right, now, this is hopeful that we'll be back to some sense of normalcy by that point next year. We'll actually be able to have that craft festival next July. So call the question. Selectman Haberda?
Aye.
Selectwoman Renner?
Aye.
Selectman Hoy is also an aye. Anything under correspondence? No. Committee reports, neither Sandy or Lou are here, so I don't think we're going to have any of those at this point. So under old business, anyone have anything under old business?
No.
Hearing none. New business. Joe, I don't know whether we've had a chance for everybody to get that out to everyone or not. But if you would.
Just send everything over to Tracy.
Okay, well, if you would do me a favor. Joe is the chair of the Human Rights Commission and has been sort of like herding cats or marshaling differing opinions and personalities as they move to get the commission really off the ground. And I appreciate the effort she's undertaken so far. If you would, for a minute, just sort of characterize Donna's resignation and a couple of points that she made relative to why she was resigning, and then talk about what programmatic plans are in place to start to move the commission to where you think we think it needs to get to.
Sure. So Donna left for a variety of reasons, but the primary concern that she had was that she felt that the commission was not making forward progress. So we've dealt with a few different issues in our first year. It'll be a year this September that we started meeting. One of the issues has been, as Matt said, some conflicting personalities, so some interpersonal issues. And part of that, I think, is tied to the fact that as a town commission, obviously, we're going to have members with very different viewpoints and with different agendas and with different understandings of things like, to give a basic example that I think Donna referenced in her letter, what racism is. So, Donna has been studying racism and social justice issues for years. She has a PhD in African American studies, and she is I think of all of us, and unfortunately this is a huge loss for us, is probably more knowledgeable about the impact of racism and racial discrimination than any of the rest of us. We also have members that, well, one member that I'm thinking of specifically, who is sort of coming into the commission without any real experience dealing with issues of discrimination and racism, and isn't, you know, particularly familiar with the terminology that's used in talking about some of these issues. And I think for Donna, it became extremely frustrating for her, as it, to be quite frank, has been for some of the rest of us, to have to spend time during meetings just talking about very basic concepts that, you know, things like systemic racism, cultural appropriation, that one of our members just wasn't familiar with. So in her letter, she, I think, wrote that she had major concerns about there being an obstructionist agenda brought to the table by this member. I'm not entirely sure that that's the case. I don't necessarily believe that anyone joined the commission with the intention of thwarting forward progress. I think that we're dealing with, as I said, people with very different points of view and different ways of wanting to move forward and accomplish, you know, the work set out to us in the charter. And so I think for Donna, at a certain point, it just became so frustrating to have to move slowly. You know, the Human Rights Commission isn't a social justice action group, it's a town commission. So really all points of view have to be listened to, have to be respected, and forward progress moves at a slower pace than it might in a group of people that, you know, were in complete agreement around the issues and how to move forward in dealing with them. And I think specifically after the murder of George Floyd, when all of the social actions started, you know, blowing up all over the country and even in Guilford and the surrounding shore towns, the frustration level that we weren't moving forward with, you know, big action plans just got to a point where staying on felt untenable for her, which I completely understand and respect. I talked to her over the course of about 3 months, trying to figure out if there was a way to work things out so that she might be willing to stay on. And ultimately, she felt that it was in her best interests to leave. So we've taken a big hit with losing her. And in the months before she left, I talked with her at some length about how to address some of the issues that we were having on the commission. And although she's left, I am moving forward with those plans. So what I've proposed to the both the commission members that we have and the 3 people that you just voted on to the commission today is a series of 3 trainings. So the first training will be presented by Margie Shapiro from the Anti-Defamation League. And this is a training on bias and discrimination. All of us bring biases into this sort of work. And I think it's really important that we discuss our individual biases so that we can move forward as an organization with an awareness of where we're kind of all coming from. I also think that having a common language, a common vocabulary is really important because we have spent quite a bit of time, as I said, in meetings discussing very, very basic concepts. So to sort of get everyone on the same page with a common vocabulary and an understanding of bias and discrimination, I think is very important. The second training will be presented by Eileen Russo, who's a social worker who specializes in trauma-informed organizational practices. She's presented workshops through the Connecticut Women's Consortium and is very well known in the field for this work. And I feel that being a trauma-informed organization is very important for us. This is coming from someone who's studying counseling, specializes in treating trauma. We're dealing with really sensitive issues when we're dealing with discrimination. And given the fact that COVID has put such a huge strain on so many people in our community, I think that having an understanding of trauma and how that relates to both people who sit on the commission and people we'll be working with in the community is really important. The third training will again be headed by, excuse me, Margie Shapiro. And we're going to craft a value statement, an organizational value statement, which we have not done. That's something that I should have done from the get-go, and being new to leadership did not understand how important that would be. We just about have our manual of governance in place, thanks to Pam, who spent obviously quite a bit of time reviewing that document and making sure that we were doing everything legally and effectively. We have a mission statement, but I think it's very important for us to have a cohesive set of values moving forward as an organization. So all members of the commission have agreed to participate in these trainings. They'll happen on Tuesday, September 22nd, Thursday, September 24th, and Tuesday, October 6th. A donor who wishes to remain anonymous has offered to fund all 3 trainings so that we don't need to apply to the town or the Guilford Foundation for any funding. So my hope is, since we've got 3 new members as of today, Eric McDonald was just voted on last month, we're kind of doing a little bit of a clean slate to help us through this transition time and make sure that moving forward we can do so in a really cohesive manner.
Anybody have any questions or comments? Joe, thank you very much, and don't be so hard on yourself about the leadership issue. I think you've been working in some difficult situations, and I appreciate your having delicately moved the organization to this point. And I think these series of training will, apropos of our earlier discussion today about. What are we doing with some of our boards and commissions? This kind of governance is exactly the kind of governance we're looking for these committees.
Well, thank you. And I'm also, I will say, I'm very interested to see how particularly the trauma-informed organizational practices will work for us. And if that's something that's successful, that may be something that I approach the board with in future. Pennsylvania recently became the first trauma-informed state in the country. They've made a commitment to govern the entire state from a trauma-informed perspective. And I think, again, especially given the impact of COVID on all of us at this point, it could be an interesting way to look at perhaps implementing some structural changes into the town leadership going forward, or town governing practices going forward. So just a thought.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
All right. Any other new business? Public forum. Anyone wishing to address the board in public forum? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second. Good. There we go. Call the question. All one voice vote. Aye.
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 Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.